Gentlemen, Alex Kanyi, tax expert, CDH Kenya, as well as Kiplimo Kigen, head of policy research and advocacy, KNCCI. Gentlemen, we get to this very important conversation a bit slightly late, but then again, we appreciate the fact that the conversation is on across the different parts of the country as to the Tax Law Amendment Bill 2024. In terms of even the proposals that you have presented as a KNCCI, you know, what does it look like when we are going to look at the document as is?
Thank you, Linda. So allow me to just start from the top. Every quarter, we publish something called the KNCCI Quarterly Business Barometer. So this is a report that measures the expectations of businesses in the coming quarter.
Yeah.
And in Q4, we asked businesses, we talked to more than 1,200 businesses across the country, and this report is actually available on our website. We asked businesses, what are some of the top challenges that you're expecting to affect your business in Q4? And top was high taxes and unfavorable regulatory environment. So this is a concern for businesses. Now, coming into the Tax Laws Amendment Bill, obviously, we had the Finance Bill of 2024, which never saw the light of day. Some proposals have been put in the Tax Laws Amendment, and also some of the proposals in the Finance Bill, and also what was about to be passed. Now, we've seen. I have to give it to the Committee of Finance and National Planning for the work that they've done and they continue to do. Some of the positive things that we are seeing, and what was one of our recommendations in the Finance Bill of 2024 is, for example, the excise tax, the remission time for excise tax, particularly for manufacturers, being moved from 24 hours to about 1 month now. That is very important because it had given a lot of challenges, particularly on working capital constraints. One of the other positive things that we are seeing is if obviously the bill passes, we'll have some reprieve on the pay slips, which then means more disposable income. Even us as business people in the private sector, we've had a challenge because when disposable income is shrinked, people don't have the ability to buy products and services that we make and sell. So businesses then tend to be affected. But even at that, we've still observed some challenges, some concerns in the bill, and we've continued to raise this with the Committee of Finance and National Planning at the National Assembly. And one of it is the introduction of withholding tax on the supply to public entities. This was actually proposed still in the Finance Bill of 2024. And we raised a concern. Businesses having the challenge that they're actually finding this particular clause as mischievous, that we're going to put a tax on any supply to public entities. Whereas currently, the pending bill stock is more than 700 billion Kenya shillings, what government owes suppliers. So then businesses are like, why are we getting taxed and the government is not even paying us in the first place? So what we've proposed to the National Assembly is that let us put a hold on this particular provision. Let the government demonstrate the ability to pay on time first, before we even think about taxing business people on the supplies.
Just how forthcoming would this be? Because if we're going to put a halt or a halt to everything with the consideration of perhaps chosen few, or perhaps a few individuals that understand the different clauses that have been incorporated in this document and how then they align to them, they make these proposals. I mean, how much more can we stretch in terms of waiting? And even before it gets to that point, just how inclusive has the public consultation process been in terms of, you know, getting to draft this bill before it gets to a point where now we are debating on a bill that has already been drafted?
Well, I think what we see outside here is the public participation that happens after the bill has already been published. However, I think CS Ndongo, before he left, I think he put out notices asking people to give him and National Treasury ideas around how do we manage our resources, how we get to raise revenue through tax and things like those. So that then, that is what I think was considered by National Treasury before then having discussions with Parliament in terms of now coming up with a bill that is now being subjected to public participation. The bid for involvement of the public by the National Treasury is not as robust as we see it post the publication. So that is definitely an improvement area for the government. But like you asked, the government is quite in a hard place. So we were looking at the Q1 performance for July to October for 2024. And basically the government is saying we've missed our revenue targets by 42 billion. The other thing they're saying, we are also borrowing heavily from the local market in terms of the treasury bills that you see. So the picture that they are painting is we need to collect those taxes. We had you Gen Zs when you opposed the Finance Bill 2024, but now what do we do? Is it increase our borrowing, or do we come back to you to allow us to perhaps tax a little bit some more? And that's why we now have the Tax Laws Amendment Bill 2024 and the Tax Procedures Amendment Bill 2024.
All right, and I'll still ask this question. In the elements that we talk about the importance of government demonstrating their capability to make payments, and that we say if they're not going to do that, we take a halt until we are certain that they're capable of that. I mean, how then will this align with the broader fiscal and economic policy and goals of the country, bearing in mind that we have timelines? We're looking at scenarios where we talk about 2030. I mean, does it not deter us from the progresses that we perhaps would have envisioned to achieve?
Linda, allow me to refer to the Budget Outlook and Review paper, which I think was published maybe less than a month ago. And this speaks about the outlook of the budget of the financial year 2025 to 2026. If you look at that report, it proposes an increase of about 173 billion Kenya shillings to the size of the budget. So the budget is going to grow. The deficit, which is the gap between what we are supposed to spend vis-a-vis what we've raised, the deficit has increased by about 70 billion Kenya shillings.
Unfortunately.
Now, any Kenyan would expect that now that things are tough, maybe we should cut our budget, and if anything, we should cut on the deficit. But as you can see, it's also increasing. So that's why you find these rating agencies like Moody's, they continue to give a negative outlook just because of such an item. Even at a household level, if my income has reduced, if things are tightening, then I have to cut my expenditure. That's a natural thing to do. But aside from that, one of the things that as a Chamber of Commerce, we continue to insist to government is on the predictability of our tax regime. One of the concerns that we've seen, particularly with this bill as well, is an increase on the Railway Development Levy, the RDL. They are proposing to increase it by 1%, from 1.5% to 2.5%. Now, Railway Development Levy is what you pay alongside the import declaration fee at the point of entry of a product into Kenya. If you look at the Finance Act of 2023, it actually reduced the import declaration fee from 2% to 1.5%. But then, you know, less than 24 months to go, and there's already another change on the same tax. Now they are proposing to increase it from 1.5% to 2.5%. Now the challenge that this poses is, and one of the works that we do at the Chamber of Commerce is we support investors who want to come and you know, settle into the Kenyan market. And I have seen some investment models by investors for Railway Development Levy and import declaration fee. Some are working with an even safer rate of 5% because they just don't know what might happen. These consistent changes, constant changes, what it does is that it discourages, you cannot plan with certainty what will happen. And business is a game of return. It's a game of planning. I have to know when am I getting my return back, and so on and so forth, as to attract investment. And so what we are continuing to insist to government is that let us have predictability in that whole process of our tax policy.
In the same breath, if we're going to acknowledge that this then will impact businesses, especially the SMEs, and in a negative way, and we're also going to acknowledge that perhaps then this will discourage foreign investment. I am curious to understand, and I'm sure most of the Kenyans then would be curious to understand, Why do you suppose, or what could have prompted the need for these amendments by the government, perhaps, and what did they aim to achieve with all this? And are there any chances at all that there are some certain industries and other sectors that are likely to benefit out of it?
It's an interesting question. We'll end with the part for benefit, because that's quite not much. Yeah. But when you think about it, when we had Finance Bill 2024, what the government said is that they were aiming at collecting around 300 and so billion Kenya shillings through the tax measures that were in Finance Bill 2024. So come now the Tax Laws Amendment Bill and the Tax Procedures Bill, and what the government is saying is we have thought about the budget and perhaps reduced a little bit. I think it was 4 point something trillion in terms of expenditure. We are now around 3.8 trillion, if I'm not wrong. So kind of telling us we are also reducing our expenditure. But at the same time, we want to collect 173 billion from these tax laws amendment bills that we now have. So I guess the question is more towards, and I think this is what we've been asking even in the committee hearings that are going on, is when do we then start focusing on the expenditure side rather than the tax side? Because it appears, it seems that there's a lot of now taxpayer apathy around just contributing more taxes and more taxes and more taxes. Guys are getting tired. Kigen speaks to predictability and the changes. Guys are getting tired. So at what time do we then say we need to cut wastage of public resources? We need austerity measures in the government, and we want that talk to be seen in the implementation by the top government officials, right to the civil servant at the lowest level. So that then if we are able to have some form of fiscal consolidation, some form of using our monies properly, then we don't need to then focus on taxes every time. I think I was appearing in the committee yesterday when the Kenya Association of Manufacturers were also doing their presentation. And one of their members was actually saying, if the government is admitting that we lose 2 billion Kenya shillings to corruption every day, if you multiply by 365 days, you're talking about 30 billion Kenya shillings. You have a finance tax laws amendment bill that wants to raise 173. You can imagine if you were to just cut that corruption or wastage through corruption just by half, you actually don't need this tax laws amendment bill. So that's where we need to be. Then to the positive side, who gets to benefit? I've seen some reduction of rates, for example, for guys doing diapers. There's a proposal to kind of reduce how much they are paying when they are bringing inputs for manufacture, which is a positive thing. I've seen an extension of the tax amnesty program, basically to allow people who have principal tax liabilities to self-disclose to KRA in exchange for a waiver of penalties and interest. So definitely somebody will benefit there, and a lot will benefit. KRA collected about 43 billion from that initiative last year. What is the other positive that I see? For employees, of course, we all benefit because of what we are seeing in terms of if you are contributing to a pension, what was allowable was a limit of up to 20,000. So if your employer gives you some money for pension and also save for yourself for pension, up to 20,000 per month was an allowable deduction, tax-free. But now they're increasing that to 30,000 per month, translating to 30,000 times 12, 360,000 in a year. If your employer was providing you meals, and the current law says that it is capped, that meal benefit is capped to 4,000 per employee per month. But now if they're proposing to increase it to 5,000 per employee per month. So we all benefit in that regard. So there are actually positive things that we could mention.
All right, and speaking of that, then this perhaps exacerbates the tax burden to the citizens as well as businesses, from what I hear or from what it is that I read? What are some of the measures that you have proposed, perhaps if any, in terms of making sure that then we improve on the element of collection or compliance as well as reduce evasion? Because those are some of the biggest, concerns that we have in terms of collection of taxes.
Thank you, Linda. So one of the things that we've obviously proposed to government, and we continue to employ government on this, is you don't need to, you don't even need to have austerity measures, and you don't even need to to raise taxes. Just in line with what my colleague has said, if we can stop the embezzlement in government, there is no need for austerity measures which government agencies are facing at the moment. But that is the hard stuff. And very few people want to do the hard stuff because cutting down on corruption and embezzlement is hard. But we have to bite the bullet at some point and actually decide what we want to do with our country. Even at that, just speaking on the taxpayers' burden, the other thing that we employ on government is you don't have to raise taxes to raise revenue, to increase revenue. Like it's not always a must that you increase the tax rate, and you're going to have directly increased tax revenues. And if you look at the tax law amendment bill, one of the proposals is to increase excise duty on telephone and internet services. Yeah. Now, today you can actually argue that internet is the fifth factor of production, and it is the horizontal infrastructure that allows for many businesses and enterprises to survive. And we've proposed to the committee that let us hold it at 15% where it is at the moment, because if you look at what internet does on a day-to-day basis for Kenyans and businesses, border riders who deliver food, they use internet all through to check them up. Yeah. You've got businesses, young people who sell on social media, Instagram, WhatsApp. They depend on this as their means of reaching customers. And you also find government services like e-Citizen. You need internet to access them. So this is an underlying infrastructure. So when we raise this, we are going to have a lot of shifts in the cost of doing business. And even at that, just speaking on the digital and technological aspect, there's the digital service tax, which now this proposal wants to transfer it to the significant economic presence tax, in line with some OECD requirements, which is totally fine. But we have a challenge with the rate. So currently it's 1.5%, but they want to increase that to an effective rate of 3%. That is a 100% hike. Now, digital service tax came in January of 2021. So you're looking at about, 3 years, about 36 months. Again, predictability of the tax regime, we want to change the rate. And if you look at digital service tax, if you look at, and I mean, most of the businesses in the digital space, look at the ride-hailing hubs, look at the e-commerce platforms, look at the quick commerce platforms. We have one of our valued members, they've been in the market for about 6 years. $60 million down the line, they're still on the runway. They're not broken even. Majority of these digital businesses are actually still in the investment phase. So we should not be raising the taxes at the moment. Let them go through the investment phase. I mean, companies like Facebook, they were in an investment phase for more than 7 years. Now they're in the reaping stage. Now you can tax them.
How much more for the informal sector, which also is quite a huge driver of the economy?
Just quickly on the informal sector before my colleagues comes in. One of the reasons why the informal sector has refused to go formal is because of
there are chances for them to
it's because of high taxation and also the relationship that government has towards informal businesses, how they handle them towards that transition. So we also have to provide a soft landing so that business people in the informal sector are encouraged to see why I should move ahead and formally register my business.
Interesting. And the regional comparisons are crucial to this. We are being constantly reminded that we stay woke. Tanzania is coming and coming big, and they're going to overtake you. Uganda is coming and coming big. They're going to overtake you. If we're going to look at this regime of tax and the proposals that have been made and look at the East African community and the countries, what do you make of it? What are the chances that we stay tall?
Well, this is a sad reality, because what we have seen, for example, and we've acted for some of investors in this country, we have seen some sudden shift of focus to Tanzania.
Right.
I will not speak about the other countries. And the reason for that is, first, they give you a very good tax holiday. So they tell you, come invest into a country, put in about 200 million Kenya shillings, equivalent, for example. For as long as you stay in this country for a period of time, we will not tax you. Just put in the investment. We'll also give you free land to be able to put in, if you want to put in a manufacturing plant, etc., so that then you can do your business in our country, as opposed to that other East African country, and in that case, they're referring to Kenya. Yeah? So with that kind of shift, and if you hear it from investors, then you know there's a problem.
There's a problem.
You know there's a problem. So does it necessarily mean that the other countries in East Africa perhaps are taxing their people less? Maybe not, but maybe the frequency of changes in tax in those other countries is not as much as we're having it in our country. So it's making the business environment a little bit unpredictable for someone who wants to come put in their money, and they want to know over a 5-year period, I have at least some stability in the tax environment. And that is what we were pushing for when we were looking at the national tax policy, which provides that 5-year gap in terms of tax changes. But that policy was being discussed this year, I think, in Parliament. And then it was pushed back to Treasury for them to make some changes. But even before Treasury and Parliament, agree on this particular document, already tax changes.
All right.
In fact, I was discussing with Kigen a while back and wondering, will we see another finance bill 2025? And I was telling, I can't assure you, because where we are, I expect anything.
Interesting. In all that, this is our business, and therefore we must contribute to it and hope that then our contributions make sense and are put to consideration. What would be your recommendation to the government such that we then get to have a win-win scenario where the government and the taxpayers both get to benefit?
Linda, first of all, I have to agree with my colleague. I hope, and I mean, CS Mbadi has spoken about this a number of times. Yeah. I hope we don't have a finance bill, another one in 2025, because that will be like 2 finance bills in a span of 6 months. I mean, seriously. I would like to say that the fiscal pressures are being felt, right? We've got a huge debt stock. We're trying to pay that. We're trying to maximize revenue. So I would like to employ government that let us not deepen our tax base. By deepening tax base, that is increasing tax rates of existing taxes in a bid to try and collect more, to go back and pay the debts. What we are saying is, let us do the hard stuff. Yeah. Let us broaden the tax base instead of deepening it.
All right, as we sum it up, I know we are telling them, please address graft and corruption and all that. How do we get to advise them to focus on, working on transparency, accountability, so that they can get to utilize the revenue that has been generated from these taxes?
You see, at the end of the day, what would motivate you and I to even pay more tax is if we are satisfied that the money that we are contributing towards taxes is being utilized properly. So the transparency around how our money is being spent, and perhaps even, giving an explainer, you gave us this much in terms of taxes. We have prioritized project 1, 2, 3, which will be directly funded by your taxes. Come end of the year, we report to you as the taxpayer. We tell you this is the much we're able to collect. We have actually utilized this money here, and you can be able to see where your money is going. I think that change of story will perhaps change also the time, the collection that this government is getting. And finally, any increase in tax or reduction has to be based on research and evidence. So that the person suggesting a tax increase or decrease is actually sitting with an economist, is actually sitting with someone on the ground. So that when, for example, you decide that we are going to put excise duty on importing transformers, has that person sat down with, say, KPLC, and you on the ground, who if my transformer is stolen or broken down, how much time will they take to even replace it?
Right.
So that tells you that there's a shortage of those transformers. But someone on the other side, on the revenue side, is saying, let's target this thing and get excise duty out of imported transformers. Does that help the situation? So if you collect revenue out of those imported transformers, how does that translate to more revenue for the government on other sides?
Wow.
And will it be even efficient in that place? We could talk more about national parks and the VATs and all of that.
Yeah.
But there is a missing link between raising the revenue vis-a-vis the impact to the economy.
Wow. Well said, gentlemen. And like you rightfully say, we can talk until the cows come back home. But we certainly hope that even in that small moment where we get to articulate these matters, then they are put to consideration. Alex Kanyi, the last speaker, tax expert, CDH Kenya, thank you so much. As well as Kiplimo Kigen, Head of Policy Research and Advocacy, KNCCI. Gentlemen, I know this was quite fast, but we appreciate that, you know, you stayed long with us so that we can speak to these matters that are of importance to the people of Kenya. It's at this point that we get to close the marketplace and the daily report, as I look forward to see you again. Thank you so much for always keeping it TV47. My name is Linda Alela. Our sign language interpreter on the other end is Rhoda Nyamai. Do have yourself a beautiful night ahead. Bye-bye.